I started deciding to set up a business other than investing in property because my husband was due to retire and we always wanted to work in a business. We've always loved property. We've always risen up the property ladder from buying, refurbing. Our children were used to living in bare plaster walls, no carpets, barely any kitchen growing up, and that was how we rose up the property ladder. But we weren't quite sure what. And eventually I got a mentor who said, have you thought about property sourcing? And I said, what's that? And in January 2012, that was where it all started. And I went out and I started researching property sourcing. There weren't really any courses back there that I'm aware of at the time. So I read the legislation for estate agents because I decided that that was the closest thing to what we were going to be doing. It doesn't say it up there, but part of my major background is a police officer. I was a police officer for over 14 years, but was injured on duty and had to leave, so I had to change roles. But legislation and regulation has always been a major part of my life, and understanding it has always been a major part of my life. And in between the police and now, I worked in the healthcare sector. Who else works in the healthcare sector? Has something to do with it. Supported housing, supported living, domiciliary. I worked frontline in healthcare and acquisitions and mergers in the healthcare sector, finding businesses that wanted to sell to major businesses within the healthcare sector. I'm now a property coach. I'm an expert, so they tell me, in sourcing compliance. A founder of NAPSA. NAPSA is the National Association of Professional Sourcing Agents that we set up about 18 months ago. We maintain partnerships with both government-approved redress schemes, the TPO, PRS, and we're in direct communication with NSALAT, which is easier to say than National Trading Standards Estates Lettings Agents team, and also HMRC's anti-money laundering team for my sins. So our full time is property sourcing. We aren't investing at the moment. The last thing that we invested in was a block of flats that we ended up flipping up in the northwest. We were going to buy and hold, but actually we had an offer that we couldn't refuse from a healthcare business who was looking for flats. And we run the training company and also the National Association for Sourcing Agents as well. What we're going to cover in the next 30 minutes is the 4 big challenges for sourcers, and this is from me having conversations with sourcers since about 2013 and helping them about the struggles that they have. The 5 big complaints that we hear from investors working with sourcing agents. A story about Harriet, name change to protect the innocent. The same for Eugene, how not to set up a HMO, and a little bit about NAPSA. So the 4 big challenges. Not completely sure they're operating compliantly. If you go out on social media, if you go out into the training sector, you will get a myriad of different pieces of information and knowledge thrown at you as to what compliant means. I can tell you that my version of it comes directly from the supervisory agents and from them agreeing with my interpretation of the law. And I've been reading it for over 12 years, heaven help me. So they're not sure about what compliant looks like because they have so many different stories out there about how, oh, you can get away with this, you don't have to do that, you can do a few deals here, you can co-source, you can do this, that and the other. But actually, they're really unsure. The strategy of sourcing itself is incredibly simple. The idea of it is incredibly simple and probably be taught in about 10 minutes flat. How you do it professionally, ethically and legally to the benefit of the investor that you're working with is a whole different ballgame. Can't find investors to work with. You're going to struggle if you've never owned a house, you've never refurbed a house, you're sourcing in Liverpool, you've never visited the place, and you've no idea about the area and the properties there and what they work for. You cannot source the whole of the UK to expand and leave you £70,000 a year job in 30 seconds flat. It's not going to happen. I'm sorry guys, but it's not. And that's from someone who today currently sources. We're currently packaging up a 1.1 million portfolio in the Northwest. We actively source on the ground now. We are in it, we're doing what you guys want to do, you're trying to do, or what you hope to do. Finding investors takes time. You have to build the relationships. You have to know what you're talking about. As my old mentor used to say, you have to damn well know your patch. You have to know the strategies that will work on those patch and the areas that they will work and the returns that you can get. You're not giving investment advice, you're just knowing your area and how to pull a deal together. And know, if you're taking a 2-bedroom terrace house back to brick, how much it's going to cost to pull it all back together again. Not a £3,000. Because that's what a lot of sourcing agents do. It's wet the finger, put it in the wind and see what number falls out to make the deal stack when they pull it together in their presentation. And I know from some of the faces I can see that you've actually seen them or received them. Not sure how to approach investors confidently. Confidence is in knowing that you're operating legally, you are professional, you have all of your right documentation in place, you know your patch, you know your strategy. You are not sourcing everything that you could, because you can't do it. Expanding into different areas of investment will come with time and experience and when doors of opportunity open. They opened for us on commercial land because someone came and said, can you source me commercial property? And I said, well, I don't know how to assess it. I'll reduce my sourcing fee by 0.75% if you teach me how you assess the site. That works. You build the relationships. Feeling alone and supported after having finished training. Being in a training room, and I've just been talking to someone today who was in a training room for 3 or 4 days, and the environment that's created and the excitement that's created about what you can achieve in 30 seconds flat when you leave. But the problem that you've got is Monday morning when you're back home and there's no one there and that excitement of the room has gone and there's no one there telling you how wonderful you are, how easy it's going to be. What are you going to do? What order do you do it? How do you take the next steps? These are the issues that we find most sourcing agents come to us with, sit down and chat with us about. The biggest complaints from investors. I paid a fee up front and I can't get it back. I had 3 calls last week with investors that have just done that. And I can tell you, hand on heart, that in any given year, hundreds of thousands of pounds are lost to unscrupulous sourcing agents. And some of that money is lost by experienced investors because these sourcing agents come to them word of mouth, or they believe that they know what they're looking at, but they don't do the necessary due diligence and do the necessary checks. And we'll hear some scary stories shortly. You have to understand who you're working with, and you have to understand if they meet national minimum standards or not for you to have any chance at all of you getting any cash back. Small claims court, maximum £10,000 in the UK. Any of the redress schemes can award a maximum of £25,000, and you have to have been sorely hurt for them to award that. I don't know that it's ever been awarded. And your sourcing agent has to be a member. You have to have an agreement with that sourcing agent. An NDA won't wash it. Protects nobody. The deal I bought was not as promised. How many of you have seen deals where it looks as if it's the best thing since sliced bread, but actually when you dig down a little bit deeper, the figures are a bit wishy-washy. It actually needs a full refurb, not £3,000 facelift. But you didn't manage to visit the property because you just trusted the sourcing agent because they were recommended or they have a major presence on the web. They've got a big website, they must be okay. No. No. Back your own gut feeling. Refurbishment estimate was completely wrong. This happens morning, noon and night. It really does. Because if you've never done a refurb, you can't possibly know how much it's going to cost, and how much have costs gone up since COVID with material costs and time costs for the professionals. What might have cost £20,000 for a 2-bedroom terrace in the northwest, I'm not talking about maybe around here, maybe 3 or 4 years ago, is probably going to cost you 30 to 35,000 now for the same job. So you can't just pluck figures out of the sky just to make the yield work or the ROI work or anything else work for an investor to buy. One, it's not professional. Two, it's not ethical. How the hell would you like it done to you? Know what you're doing, know what you're talking about, and know how to assess the refurb. If you have to go out and learn it, then do it. Go and network at groups like these local to you and talk to investors that are on the front line and doing the refurbs. What type of refurb are you doing? How much has the cost changed? How difficult is it to get electricians, plasterers, whatever else it is? What's the cost of a back to brickwork refurb on a 2-bedroom terrace to 3-bedroom semi? Whatever it is that you're looking at, use the knowledge in rooms like this of people that are doing it on a day-to-day basis to get an up-to-date approximate costing. The end valuation was in cloud cuckoo land. How often do we see that? A lot of sourcing agents make it so that it makes the deal stack. They have no evidence to prove it. They've never spoken to agents. If they've searched Rightmove, forget it. It's a similar house sold for 150,000, but actually it's 9 miles down the road. It's a semi-detached with a garage and nothing like the one that you're going to buy. And this happens weekly on social media. And 5 sources are unprofessional, unregulated, and it's the Wild West. It is the Wild West. It's not that we're unregulated. We are regulated. We're regulated by all those bodies that I mentioned earlier. The problem is that they weren't aware of us. They are now. And I make no apologies for that. And it's going to get tighter and tighter and tighter. And that is what we want, because we want the sector to be professional. We want to sit alongside the property marks, the estate agents, the lettings agents. We are a necessary service and a service that is in demand from investors, but we have to fit the bill for what those investors are looking for. Harriet, name changed to protect the innocent. Been sourcing for a couple of years, getting deals first and then advertising out on social media. And it came with a lot of success for Harriet. And the revenue started coming through the doors, and it was happy days. Until we had a panicked telephone call with Harriet. And Harriet was given 10 days to produce full compliance information and details of all clients worked with in the last 12 months by HMRC's AML team. Now, of all the supervisors, HMRC are the ones that are more than capable of kicking backside down the road through the next county with financial fines. An average fine I've seen as high as £24,000 for a sourcing agent for not knowing what they were doing. The highest in the estate agency sector was £215,000. These guys will issue fines for fun. They don't care that you don't know what you're doing. So with chatting, we found out that within 10 days, Harriet had to provide proof of AML training. They'd operated with Deal First, Investor Second strategy, which immediately put them with the way that they were operating in breach of money laundering regulations. They didn't have all the legally required documentation in place. The ones that they weren't fit for purpose, they were carrying out virtually no due diligence on investors or sellers. And the timing of the checks that they were carrying out on the clients didn't meet HMRC requirements. Timing of verification for HMRC is key. And I've just read an 11-page failure report on a sourcing agent highlighting that across every page, as well as something called proliferation financing. Now, if you're in finance, you're probably aware of what that is. If you're a sourcing agent, you have probably never heard of it. But I'm telling you now, if you don't have that in your documentation and your risk assessment does not take that into consideration for sellers and buyers, you will fail a HMRC check. You will fail it. So we got Harriet registered with HMRC for AML supervision, but she ticked the yes box that she had everything in place that she needed because she'd been told to do it on a training course. It's okay, just tick it. They're not interested in you. You're a sourcing agent. You're small fry. Asked Harriet to prove all compliance in 10 days. Random spot check. We worked and we prioritised training and documentation. We couldn't stop the fine. because Harriet had traded. I can't prevent the failures from the past of you trading. What I can help you with is set up now, and if you haven't traded, maybe get the fine mitigated to a point, because I work with HMRC's money laundering team. The fine was £1,700. It could have been an awful lot higher than that. Lessons learned. Before setting up your business, you have to have a good knowledge of data protection. You have to have a really good knowledge of anti-money laundering, day-to-day processes and legally required documents, and how you operate day-to-day. Just printing off a policy that somebody else has given you and putting your company name in it will not wash. It won't work anymore. HMRC read them. If you don't understand what you're doing, you will fail, and HMRC now know where to look, including WhatsApp groups and Facebook groups. So all of those sourcing agents that are marketing deals out there and aren't compliant, they see all of the investors that respond and say that they want details of the deal as well. You won't know who they are, because they're not going in there saying we're a HMRC's anti-money laundering officer. But they are on social media, and they are starting to find an awful lot more sourcing agents. Eugene joined a UK training company to start sourcing journey. Really excited after being told how easy it was. Is sourcing easy? Even when you're sourcing for yourself, is it easy? No, it's not. Even when you're sourcing for yourself, it's not. It's time consuming. They were advised by the sourcing training company to set up sourcing business on Companies House, gain experience by co-sourcing with the lead trainer, using the lead trainer's compliance, and that they will get a fee for every deal they completed through the trainer's investors. Is that okay? No. Eugene successfully completed deals and saved enough to bank and go solo. Came to the National Association because they wanted to set up professionally, and we told them what orders to do everything in. HMRC, when they registered for money laundering supervision, checked Companies House. Date of registration. £1,500 for having registered at Companies House and not registered with HMRC in due time. The training company didn't pay the fine. What I say to people is this: if someone tells you you can co-source legally and my compliance will cover you, say if you're wrong and Tina Walsh is right, will you pay my fine? They won't. If he had been caught trading, and lucky because the trading went through personal name and not limited company, if HMRC had found out, they'd have been for the high jump. But because there was no trading, the fine was £1,500 to the limited company for not having registered. Trading, I've seen £24,000 for sourcing agents that have traded, either registered or not registered, but not knowing what they're doing and not carrying out the appropriate low, high risk overall business risk assessments on the clients. Required training, minimum standards. It's legally required that you have data protection and money laundering training. I see a lot of them out there for 2 years. Standardly across our sector, it's highly recommended you do it at least annually. But if you do that, you have to have a way of keeping yourself up to date, because legislation may not change, but interpretation of it does. And at the moment, HMRC's interpretation is changing almost monthly. So you need to be somewhere where people can keep you up to date as to what you should be doing, because they don't care that you don't know. They will just fine you for not knowing. Company setup, correct SIC code 68310. That is real estate, estate agency. If anyone tells you to set up as something else, they are telling you to set up fraudulently. And HMRC don't take kindly to you setting up with the wrong SIC code and operating as an estate agency business, which is what a sourcing business is. They will take it that you are trying to defraud them, that you are trying to deceive them. And that's from HMRC's anti-money laundering team, directly word for word. If you set up with the wrong SIC code, they will take it that you're deliberately trying to defraud them. redress scheme, TPO or PRS, ICO, data protection supervision, HMRC's anti-money laundering supervision. But the registrations are the tip of the iceberg. The insurance is the tip of the iceberg. If you operate and you haven't got a clue what's expected of you to meet minimum standards, you will fall over, you will fail, and HMRC, if they catch you, will fine you and fine you heavily. If you think that you don't have the money to set up and be compliant and you'll do a few deals, if you are caught, HMRC's fine will make that cost of compliance fade into insignificance. Don't do it. Don't do anything until you can afford to do everything. How not to set up a HMO. Very experienced HMO investor, tight on time, decides to work with a sourcing agent. Brilliant. Accepts a deal on paper, agrees for the agent to manage the refurbishment of the property to a 5-bed HMO standard to meet local authority HMO standards. It was a 3-bed changed into a 5-bed. This is a really, really experienced HMO investor that came to us. The investor doesn't visit the site at all before purchase or during the refurbishment. Attends the site on the day the HMO officer is visiting to issue the HMO licence after inspection. Guess what happens? 2 of the 5 bedrooms were too small. The fire alarms were the wrong type and poorly fitted. Emergency lighting, there wasn't any, and the fire doors were not to standard. Guess what? Shock horror, HMO licence refused. The sourcing agent had never purchased a property, never refurbed a property, and had no idea what the standards for the HMO were. And HMO standards vary from local authority to local authority, depending on who you work with, and you have to know your local patch, which is why I say know your patch. Get to know your HMO officer if it's HMOs you want to source for. What are the standards do they require? We've sat down with ours. They'll give you a list. They'll even recommend suppliers sometimes. You've got to know. That had to go back to basically brickwork and start the refurb again. And he wanted to know how he was going to get his cash back off the sourcer. You're not, because they don't have it. Whatever sourcing fee you've paid, they've spent. So how can we stop this happening? How can we prevent this from happening? We set up, I'm not calling it its full name, NAPSA, National Association of Professional Sourcing Agents. There's a professional missing off there. I have to tell my daughter off for that. She's done these slides. Our aim is to raise standards. We work with sourcing agents to get them to meet minimum standards. We one-to-one handhold you through the entire process for £195 plus VAT per year. You don't have to buy our course, you don't have to buy our training. If you've got your own documents in place, you've had your own training, I will go through everything along with my aide Claire, and we will give you a report and feedback, and we will work with you until the documents are up to scratch and you meet standards. No extra charge. Why? Because I want to clean up the sector. Because I want 100% compliance. And I know it's a big ask of the Wild West, but if NAPSA's goal is 5,000 members, if we can clear, there's somewhere north of 10,000 at the moment advertised on LinkedIn, anything from property introducer to, I don't know, all sorts of different names they give themselves now to try to avoid having to be compliant and legal and think that HMRC won't find them. There is a need for property sources, but professional ones, and NAPSA's there to do it. So why is NAPSA different? We check full compliance before you can find anybody on our site. So we manually check their insurance, make sure it's fit for purpose, and if they're providing refurb service, the insurance covers them for refurb. We check that they are registered with the redress scheme, with the ICO, with HMRC. We check that they have got fit for purpose training in place, and we check and I read through their documentation. If anyone comes to us with an NDA, it's kicked right back because it isn't fit for purpose for anyone or anything. And we work with sources to get them to the stage where they meet minimum standards. NAPSA is not set at a standard that's really high. NAPSA is set at national minimum. National minimum standards, that's all we're asking. And when they meet that standard, they're approved, and you as investors can come to our site and you can search. Completely free. Completely free. There's no charge to investors for using the site. You can search geographically and on strategy and it will bring you up a list. You can communicate with them completely free of charge. And as far as sources are concerned, apart from your annual fee, we do not take a cut of your deal. I am not interested in taking money off you from a deal. I know exactly how hard you work for it. We are there to support, to guide, to give you the tools necessary to be the most professional sourcing agent that you can be, and provide a safe environment for investors to come and search and find a legal and compliant sourcing agent in the UK. So if you're not completely sure you're operating compliantly, we do one-to-one checks and we give you one-to-one support. If you can't find investors, investors come and register with the site. We've got about 160 investors registered waiting for sourcing agents to meet minimum standards to introduce. Do we do any checks on the investors? To a certain level. We'll make sure that they're aware of the sort of standards that you have to uphold, and we'll make sure that they can communicate. If you as members have problems with communication or they start messing you about, you come and you tell us and we kick them off the programme, that's it, they don't stay on. But it doesn't cost the investor anything. You're feeling lonely, there's a private group for our approved members where you can talk. We've already had several of our sources actually form co-sourcing groups because they're all legal, so they can co-source. So if they have an investor that they can't find something for, you might be able to do, and then you can share your fee, and that is how you can expand your sourcing business to cover much greater areas. You have a profile that appears, it says, "Hi Sarah, welcome to," that is your NAPSA landing page. Complete, update your profile, submit it. We use spotlights for marketing, so our platform is a marketing platform for you. We're just rebuilding the profiles, and the profiles will look much nicer than they do currently, and apparently Anthony told me earlier on that he thought that they were quite nice anyway, the way that they look. But we're improving all of that. You will eventually, going forward, be able to put video reels on of your deals, of properties that you've viewed, presentations. So all of the information about you and your sourcing business, it isn't just about you having a badge that you can say, I'm a NAPSA member, I've paid my fee, I'm a member of NAPSA. What you can say is, yes, I've paid my fee, but they've manually checked all of my due diligence. They monitor me. Our system monitors expiry dates. If their insurance isn't renewed within a month, they're no longer searchable. If their redress scheme renewal isn't renewed within a month, they're no longer searchable, and they go into the back end again, and we work with them to get them back up to level again. So as a trade body, we're doing much more to maintain standards and improve standards. So steps, how does it work? You join NAPSA and register your business. You don't have to be fully compliant to start. Any member of NAPSA gets 25% off any of our training at all, any training that they want, automatically 25% off. Why? Because I want you out there, I want you legal, I want you professional, I want you a member of NAPSA, and I want you shouting about NAPSA from the rooftop. You send your details in for review. The team check everything, go through the policies, complaints, risk assessments, give you a report feedback. You can then go through it. If you've got any questions, we can have a one-to-one chat. We can have a video conference call of you working through the document with me. I do all sorts of different things to help and support depending on the area that you're struggling with.